Cameron, Gary, thank you so much for giving me a little bit of your time. And I got to start off every podcast. I don't know if you guys have paid attention to me, know my podcast or anything like else, but before we jump to the interview, I am super grateful for any guest I ever get, especially people just as special as you. We got to start it off with what I like to call the over the top intro to show your greatness and specialness for coming here. So if you don't mind, let's get it started.
Absolutely.
I'm going to
Nice
do
to
this
meet
in
you.
the way
Thanks for having us.
Okay. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, he hails from the coffee capital of the world by way of North Carolina when he is not in the hollers of Kentucky or in the streets of Monrovia or cage diving with great white sharks or doing rural community development in Sierra Leone, West Africa. He is documenting the lives of those brave volunteer firefighters all across our great nation. Not to be outdone, not his partner, Gary Matoso, all the way from the Emerald City, also known as Seattle, by way of San Francisco. He is a photojournalist turned director, has captured the smiles and cries of storytelling all over the place, from the former Soviet Union, Paris, the Middle East, and he aims to capture the human experience while he maintains his desire for meaningful connections with people. And I hope he does that at least one more time, right in your face, ears, and eye holes. Cameron, Gary, welcome to the podcast.
Wow.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Sam. That was awesome.
That was amazing. So much.
I mean this. After watching this documentary, I want to thank you guys because I'm just going to put on Front Street, ignorant about what the volunteer firefighter program just was. I just thought it was a bunch of people who trying to relive their glory days, your weekenders. Hey, look how awesome I am. I used to think that. But now, after watching this documentary, not only did it explore my ignorance about what they did and how well they're needed and just plain why they're needed. What I know this is based off the film by Peter Yoakum, but what about that made you want to dig deeper into these lives of the volunteer firefighter service?
Yeah, so Peter Yoakum was our executive producer on this project. So he had really come up with this idea that someone needed to make a film on volunteer firefighters. He was looking for a story that was hopeful, that would bring people together. And at the same time, he was learning about the volunteer fire service. And so he had realized that there was this real need for recruitment of new volunteers across the country. But also, like you said, that people just are ignorant about this. People don't know what volunteer firefighters are, what they do. And so there was this need for public awareness and support because the call numbers are going up and the number of volunteers are going down. So he had really thought someone needs to tell these stories and get this out there in a way that has impact. So that's when he approached us, when he brought together the other partners on the film, the National Volunteer Fire Council and John Deere, and just started pulling the pieces together to help make this film happen. So that's when we came on board, and we had, like you, we knew very little going into this. And so we had a lot of education to do, a lot of exploration before we even started making the film.
Gary?
Yeah, I mean, I just will concur with Cam. Like when Peter first approached us about, making a film, we knew nothing about the volunteer fire service. It's something we'll probably talk about, the casting, the stories that we did, but through interviews, talking to Peter about the research that he had done. Also, we were talking to our other partner, the National Volunteer Fire Council. We started to kind of learn the basics, volunteer firefighter 101, we like to call it. But it was really when we did the casting and all these stories came through, and we just started to realize how many people, 700,000 volunteers, firefighters out there, across the country. And we were just kind of overwhelmed by their passion and their commitment to this, and, family tradition, and just what, how it's changed people's lives. It's also, we realized, not only like just the critical role that these people are playing across communities across the country, but also just the, the power of the, what these people are getting out of being volunteers in terms of, just a sense of purpose, giving themselves meaning, being a part of their community, giving back to their community. There's just a lot of, it's just a really rich story that did need to be told, that most people don't know about.
Hey, I like how you said that. When you talked about casting and you talked about, obviously you did the interviews to various fire houses across the country. How did you decide on them? How did you decide to say this is the firehouse that we want to showcase?
Yeah. So originally we thought we were going to do 3 stories. That was kind of like when we just first started talking about the project, we'll do 3 stories, take a deep dive into these 3 places. And then we got that casting, we had put out some calls into a couple different places and, submissions for stories and people who might want to participate in it. And we got like over 800 submissions, within like a couple weeks, which was just a lot of stories to go through. And Louise Collette, our casting director, kind of led that effort of kind of weeding through those. But at that point, we realized, oh, wow, this is a bigger story. Like in order to fully paint a portrait of the volunteer fire service, we just didn't think we could do it with just 3 stories. So at that point, it was really kind of I describe it as having a matrix of we had, different like parts of the country we wanted to show. So we definitely want to make sure we had West Coast, East Coast, Midwest, large communities, urban communities, smaller communities. So that was something that we were considering, we different types of people, different ages of people, different backgrounds. We want to make sure we were, reflecting, lots of people could see themselves, in the film itself. And then there was always the personal stories that the people had. So it was really kind of looking at all those things. And it's like one story came in and we started with a great story in California. So we kind of had the West Coast covered, wildfires covered. It was a woman, young woman firefighter. So that was, one of our feet. We have tons of great women in this, in the documentary. But so it just kind of started like that, piece by piece. We started putting these stories together, kind of based on the overall, mix of stories to tell. Yeah.
Cameron?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just add on top of that sometimes you would have those stories come through. We would be kind of that logical approach to, okay, we need to cover this in a certain way with a certain balance, but then we would have like a story come through all of a sudden that just immediately grabbed us and was like, oh, this one must be in, even just from that first description we got from someone, and then of course talking to them and fleshing it out more. But there were some where it was just, it just felt obvious that they need to be in them. And there's, a couple of the, I don't want to give too much away from the film, but there's some, twists and turns and some unexpected things that firefighters do, some pretty unexpected stories in there. And when some of those came through, it was just like, oh, this is really interesting. This one's got to be in. So let's figure out how to adjust things around it. And there's only so much you can predict. We did a lot of that work up front, talking to people and understanding their stories and, making sure they were on board and understanding what types of things we might be able to film with them while we were there. But then you get there on the ground and you just have to kind of adapt to what you find. That's what documentary filmmaking is. You're not scripting it ahead of time, right? So a lot of that was then, adjusting on the fly. And there are people in the film who we didn't even think were going to be in the film until we got there on the ground that day and met them and realized, oh, this is a great character and we have to follow them. So
That's
so
awesome.
Yeah.
Who were the original 3?
Well, we didn't have them. We didn't have them. We were just kind of coming up with a story structure. Yeah, we were just thinking about how we were going to approach the project, and we thought we would be looking for 3 stories, but and then we changed our strategy.
All right, the way I looked at it, because after watching this documentary, the number, 750,000, I looked at it the other way. I thought it was a weeding out process, basically, because you and again, my own ignorance, out of 7, a big number like that, I thought it was more stories, and maybe some didn't exactly make the cut. Or is that the case?
Oh, there were a lot more stories we could have told, and I'm sure we could have even pushed to get more submissions, but it was plenty for us to work with, I think, to do with what we needed. But I mean, I think limiting it to 8 stories was, that was just the realities of what you can tell in a single film, and just what we could do from a production perspective. But I think there were plenty of more I'm sure hundreds of stories,
Yeah.
thousands of stories we
Yeah.
probably could have done.
Like
Yeah.
you said, 700,000, you could go to your local department, I'm sure, whatever the closest volunteer department is to you, and probably find, 5, 10 fascinating stories of people. So it was definitely, there was that component of whittling it down. There are some amazing stories that we weren't able to tell, and that would have been pretty cool. So yeah.
Like, I'm picking my words very carefully not to spoil this thing for the viewers and listeners of this podcast, but I'm going to say it like this. Out of the 8 that you picked, and quite honestly, you guys were learning on the job as this went on. What town or firehouse surprised you the most? And I'll leave that for either one of you. It may not be the same.
Yeah, I guess I would start with, and this is, gives away a little bit, but there's one town where, they were in Virginia, and they, were a volunteer fire department that had started because they wanted to be able to get, to members of their community quicker when things were going wrong and the nearest fire department was too far away. So they started as a normal fire department, but then they started getting all these calls for cows in swimming pools, horses trapped in a ditch or something, like, all these large animal calls, because that's the part of the country they were in. They were in horse country in Virginia. And so basically they had to figure out what to do about that. And so that was really, when that one came through, that was one of those, I think, unexpected ones that it was, this is not what people think of this when they think of a firefighter. It's not the, big burly guys going and breaking down doors and burning buildings. It's responding to your community, realizing what's going on. So they've had to deal with a lot of really interesting calls in that part of the country. And that was a really fun one to go film.
Okay. Gary?
Yeah, it's hard just to pick one department. I think for me, it was actually the visit, going from department to department and seeing the differences of these places. And, we shot a lot of the stories back to back. So we just literally spend, 4 days in one location, and we just went to another location. So there was one run where we started in a very small town in rural Nebraska, like 500 people farming community, which is, I grew up in suburbs and big cities. And so it was unique cultural experience, just to experience this small, town that's just like literally 1 square mile, and the whole community revolves around farming, and we went from there directly to New York to Muncie, New York, which is again, don't want to give away too much, but it's a ultra orthodox and ultra orthodox Jewish community, and it's like, I think 95% or Orthodox or ultra Orthodox. And so kind of going from this small town in Nebraska to this ultra Orthodox Jewish community, which had a huge firehouse, like they've been around for over 100 years or 150 years. I believe they're coming up on their 150-year anniversary. So it just had a completely different culture, different completely different types of people, different, just physically very, very different place. And I think it just kind of kept going on like that. So, we went to Virginia, then we went to DC, and, each department had its own culture, its own style, but there was something that just brought them all together. Even though they felt like very different places, the whole idea, the commitment that these people have, and their desire to kind of serve their communities and give back, and just the basic attitude to get stuff done and get out there and just help was just common through every place that we went to. So, I mean, again, very different places, but very similar threads and themes throughout all of the departments.
If it helps, I'll just put in my 2 cents without spoiling too much. Muncie was one of those ones that stuck out to me very tough because, how do I say this? Because of the religious aspect and the need aspect. Because there are some things where, and I'll word it like this: you couldn't do certain things because it would violate the religion. But these things need to be done for human safety. So finding that through line, that was very, very, that struck me, because I didn't, when you think of firefighters, you don't think of like that they have to answer to on the religious aspect of it. But it's more, it was about saving lives, but I didn't realize how much of that played into a community like Muncie. So that was mine. If you know, if we're keeping score here. But you guys talk to a lot. I feel weird because they're real people. I don't want to call them characters, but here we are. Um, has there been any follow-up since the film has been made where you just kind of showed to people or you reached back out to them? Because each one of the 8 stories that was displayed in this documentary, they were awesome in their own right. So has there been any follow-up?
Yeah. So I mean, we've played it. Not only do we send it to all those people and showed it to them and got their immediate feedback, but a lot of them have been able to show it in their communities at their fire departments and, you know, let those, because they're beyond the central characters, those whole communities were featured in these stories. But yeah, their feedback was really important to us, definitely, since they were, you know, we became so close with them in the process of making it, and, you know, knowing that we're representing their stories well and honestly is really important to us. So thankfully we got a lot of positive feedback from all those people that were featured in it. You know, I think volunteer firefighters in general are very humble people. They're doing this just because they want to, and you know, they even though we got all those submissions of stories, it wasn't because people were, you know, eager to be movie stars or something like that. It was because they could see the value in telling these stories and in sharing them to help the volunteer fire service and to help communities. So people were really very selfless in sharing their stories with us, which isn't an easy thing to do. I mean, when we drop in for, you know, a week or less than a week, and it's an intense period, and you've got cameras in your face, and we're asking questions about their, you know, personal lives and backgrounds and sensitive things and difficult things sometimes. But everyone was very, you know, just very generous with their time and with their stories, because I think they saw the value in what we were trying to do and the goals of the film, and they're so, you know, the volunteer fire service is such a huge part of people's lives. When you start doing it, you either probably fall off pretty quickly, or it becomes like, you know, very meaningful, very big part of your life. So for these people, I think they really were happy that these stories were being told, because they haven't been heard that much.
Yeah. I just add, we've been doing some theatrical screenings over the last couple of weeks. We were in New York last week, and Cam's in LA right now. He's doing some screenings there, and we've been able to invite some of the firefighters in the film to actually kind of participate in Q&As after the film. So that was fun. So back in New York, we had all of the Muncie guys came. A lot of the people featured in the film came, and that was fun. And we've got another showing next week in Washington State, where some of the people from the Fire Academy story that we featured on will be there. So that's fun to have them really participate. It's actually more interesting to hear from them than from us, honestly, I think, for people. So that's been fun.
And just to emphasize again, like the main goal with this was to get it out there in communities where it can help with recruitment. So a big part of the distribution is community screenings hosted by departments or in small communities. So there's over or close to 500 of those that are being planned right now, about 100 or close to 100 that have already happened, and a lot more in the works. So anyone can, you know, through a fire department, through other community organizations, can use the film for free to host one of those screenings. So they just have to go to oddhoursfilm.com, and they can put in a request, and the team will help set that up with them, find the venue, do the marketing around it, all of that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, I was kind of leaning towards that because I want to know, how has the reaction been from these screenings? I mean, the firefighters are one thing, you guys are another thing, but the audience, how have they been reacting to the screeners? I mean, you take a guy like me who didn't know anything about anything, and I watched this and learned a lot. So I would imagine there's more people like me, or maybe it's different. How's it been?
I mean, I think the reaction has been super positive from, you know, from the people we've talked to who've seen the film. You know, I mean, we've been kind of living with it for so long. It's, you know, it's nice for it to get out in the world and have other people who really have no connection to the film at all see it. But yeah, I think people have liked it. I think people are inspired by it, and you know, it is a really positive story. You know what I mean? It's like, and I think in a time when things are pretty divisive around the country, and it's hard to even take any topic and make a film or talk about it without, you know, getting into politics or, you know, that coming up. And I think this film does rise above it. And I think it was part of Peter's original vision, and it's just something that's, that we kind of weren't, I don't think, going intentionally into making a film that was, that didn't delve into these topics. But it was really, we went to all these places. The focus was on volunteer firefighters, really about people who were helping their communities. It didn't matter if it was a red state, a blue state, a purple state. Again, all these people have a common cause to really help their neighbors, and give some purpose to their lives, and just help. And I think that's an inspiring story for people to see, especially right now. Gave us, or me personally, a little bit of hope, after finishing the film.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would, as you said, like on the practical side, like the proof is in the pudding. We'll see as the film rolls out and all these community screenings, like the real impact is, does it result in more people stepping up and becoming firefighters? And we'll see, how that goes. That's our hope. And hopefully the film will help with that, at least. There's a lot of people doing a lot of things to try to work on that. But like Gary said, I think that just being able to talk to audience members, even people in these, bigger cities, like here in LA a couple nights ago, there was a woman who came to one of the screenings, didn't know just came to the theater, didn't know what movie she was going to see that night, decided to watch a documentary with us. And afterwards was just talking about how she could see how, even as someone who lives in, larger cities and for populations that aren't necessarily served by volunteers, that there was something just really meaningful about this topic, that this, the volunteer fire service and volunteerism in general, and people taking care of the communities, how that's just a thread that unites so many people in this country and needs to unite so many people in this country, I think. So hopefully, even for those who maybe aren't in a part of the country where they're served by volunteers and where they can go join, they'll see there are other ways that they can support. And they'll see that, that this does go even beyond volunteer firefighters, that it's about community. It's about the way that people, step up and take responsibility for their communities and for their neighbors. And that's how this country works. That's how it's always worked, is by people working together to do that. So finding other ways to do that, I think, in your life is really important. So anytime we hear, I hear someone kind of resonating with that larger message of the film, that's just really great to get those reactions.
That's awesome, because that I would hope that would be the reaction. I would hope people not like resistant to it, because after watching this, it does give you a little hope and maybe a little bit of responsibility. The way you look at it, you look around your neighborhood or your community and you see what can be better. Leave it, the old saying, leave it better than how you found it, that type of thing. And when you watch this movie, it gives you that hope. It gives you that, people, there are still people out there like that. Now, when you I gotta ask you guys, your first screening, when you peek your head in and you see how the public, is there a little bit of nervousness with it, or did you just walk in that screening saying, oh yeah, these people get it, I don't even have to worry about it, everyone's positive?
No,
I don't know. I was nervous. I don't think I was nervous, but I was excited to see how people were going to respond about it. And you just kind of want to, hear. And there's some funny parts of the films. You just want to hear, or at least parts we think are funny, and hear people laugh to it. Hear how Peter. You're just kind of more listening to the audience and seeing how they respond to it. But yeah, I'd say I wasn't nervous, but I was more excited.
I'm nervous every time.
Okay.
I think I'm just like, yeah, because I also was like the editor on the film and dealing with a lot of the technical side of things. So I'm always just like watching every time it starts. I'm like making sure everything looks perfect, sounds perfect. Like, how's the sound system in this theater? How's everyone experiencing it? But maybe that's just my I have more anxious personality, maybe, than Gary.
Hey, if it helps, you did a good job. And quite honestly, I know we're up against it. I'm looking at my clock right now. So what I want to do, all over our social media, when this airs, I'm going to put up, all the links that you guys gave me, so people can check this out, or where it's going to be, or the next screening, and all that other good stuff. Mainly because I think it is important to watch, because of the feelings I got about community and helping out. Now, I don't necessarily know if I'm going to be a firefighter, but I think there is hope that says do better, I guess. And the stories in here, granted you only had 8. I'm very curious. Is there, I don't know, something else in the works where you may examine or come back, or anything else down the pipeline where you just kind of let's revisit, in about because all right, I'm going to say this in a way where I don't spoil anything, because the way this movie closed, the Marvel credit scene gave me so much hope for the future.
Mm.
It made me feel a type of way where I was like, they're doing another one, right? Are they?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, only time will tell. We'll see. Certainly, there are, as we said, so many stories that are out there. You could do a whole series of these things and you wouldn't run out of different amazing stories to tell, not even just following up on these same ones, but there's hundreds more out there. So we'll see. We have no immediate plans for that. We're just focused on getting this one out there in the world and having the impact, that we hope it will. But we'll see.
Well, Cameron, Gary, thank you so much for giving me a little of your time. You're welcome back to the podcast whenever you want. I honestly, I can't wait to see the next one. I was so captivated by this. I don't know. Maybe I'm just putting it out there in the atmosphere. But you guys are more than welcome to come back. And thank you so much for your time. And thanks for stopping by the podcast.
Thank you for your interest. Yeah. Thanks very much.
Bye. Bye. Have a good one.
You too.
Take care.
Sam, appreciate you.
Oh, thanks, Annie.